My first thought was that my medication had suddenly and severely stopped working. It was the only real rational explanation at the time. I wanted to start off with that because before I explain myself, I want you to know why it's taken me a long time to take this action. You see, I have a condition, well, maybe it's not the word most people would choose. I suppose most people would say that I'm batshit crazy, and that to tell the truth, I wouldn't blame them. But that's not really fair. When I'm on my medication, I'm pretty much normal. Anesthetic, yes, but nothing for worry. It's taken me years to get this far. My multitude of failed prescription cocktails, and even over dozens of installations. But what I tell you next is true and real, and is most importantly urgent. I know that knowledge of my past will work against me, but please try not to look past that and see me for who I am now. Do I sound mad? Do I sound irrational? Ask yourself these things as you listen, and ask yourself what you could have done. It occurred roughly 8 months ago. I worked the graveyard shift at 7-Eleven. Unfortunately, with my short past self, it's one of the only jobs available. But it's all the honest living and it gets the bills paid. But I digress. In Chicago, one of my benefits of living in the city that I'm walking distance from my apartment, so there's no need for a car. As I was walking home, my cell phone went off. I remember thinking it was strange since it was a little after 4 in the morning. But I wasn't too alarmed. My friends and family know how I work the graveyard shift, so there was a good chance that it was someone. I know being polite and not interrupting my sleep during the day. Whoever it was hung up before I could answer, and I couldn't call back because the number was listed as private. Shrugging it off, I continued on, only to have it ring again. As I got to my apartment door, this time I answered it in time, but the line was filled with static that I couldn't make out anything out. That's all that happened that night. They seem to be mundane and unimportant, but it isn't. It happened again in the next night. The next, and it has happened every night, since then including last night, and I'm sure it will happen tonight. It was the first sign of something that had gone wrong, but I didn't know until 4 days later. I had assumed that someone was just prank phone calling me. Every night when I went to see my sister that weekend, I found my second sign. My sister lives in the suburbs and has been happily married for at least 8 years and has a 3-year-old son named Francis. It's become something a bit of tradition that I take a taxi over to her place for dinner once or twice a month. So my showing up on a weekend unannounced shouldn't have been a surprise, but when I got to her house, it was empty. Oh, I could tell. You don't understand. When I say her house is empty, I mean it was emptied, deserted. Nobody was there, and there was no signs of people having ever been there. There was no furniture, no locks on the doors, and no light fixtures. Just bare walls with exposed outlets and bare floors. I told you this because of my condition earlier. While I never had this sort of hallucination before, I knew better than to think of what I saw was real. An entire family just disappearing in the middle of the suburbia, but it doesn't make any sense. So logical thought was that it didn't just disappear. I just wasn't seeing reality as I was. I called another taxi and went home and called my psychiatrist. 3 days, innumerable blood tests later, I was declared that my medication was still at full strength and in my bloodstream, and that perhaps I had dreamed the whole thing. It was worth nothing at this point. I had tried calling my sister several times and only received the wrong number message with no intermediate options whatsoever. I decided to take a friend over to see to my sister's house. If nothing else, I would have at least have someone to confirm that it was empty. I should have known again of this started off receiving phone calls. the day that I had decided to enlist the help of my friend. The number of calls doubled, but I don't have that many friends, and of the friends that I do have aren't very many who are aware of my condition. So I didn't have many options to choose from. Eventually, I have decided on Lisa. She knew the most about my past, the most about my problem, and I knew I could trust her not much to judge. When I called her, she told me that I was dumb and that I had to wait for long to call and to get my ass over there so my life could get back to normal. God, I miss Lisa. She was always so good to me. I headed over to her place that evening, only to discover that it was empty as well. Since then, everyone I know has disappeared one by one, and the damn phone calls have continued to plague me. I threw away my cell phone months ago, but to no avail. Payphones ring as I passed. I find my cell phones in my pockets. The type of varieties, but at the end is always the same, ringing and the world continues on. Though even though in the last house I came to the looks of it, as it's never seen a living soul. When I pass the street's vendor's empty shop, I can still pick up the paper with today's date and a new story. That's why I'm writing this, as if the world can still talk to me, then maybe I could still talk to it. Maybe I could still send out a message, and it's a very important message. You see, I don't care so much about the loneliness. I don't even care that much about the prospect of ever seeing another living creature again. I care about the warning outside world, reading the papers and become an obsession of mine, and I have come to realize something. It isn't that it's disappeared, it's me. I also know why I haven't been missed. You see, I didn't just vanish without a trace. I was replaced. I don't know what it is that replaced me, but it doesn't have good intentions. When I said earlier that I'm okay with the prospect of never seeing another living soul again, I mean it. But every time I opened up one of my cell phones that appear in my pockets, I am greeted by the same image of my hand clutching a knife and a slit throat. It had been roughly 8 months since I've seen thousands of cell phones. And that, my little pretties, was Cell Phones, a cell phone creepypasta. My final thoughts on this story? It's a very good and very well made creepypasta. I mean, it's a really amazing story, but I will have to say, although it wasn't creepy, but it does have an interesting concept, and it definitely kept my attention with the whole story itself. I was very curious of, what's going on in the story with this person or protagonist getting the same phone call from the same number, although he can't call it because it's a private number. Which, I mean, it's believable in a sense, because, I've had phone calls stating, a private number and all that. I mean, I've actually, have been through that. So, yeah, I've seen a couple narrations of this story, but one particular narration I did remember seeing. I know this wasn't the first narration of this story to be released, or, oh, excuse me. I know this one narration I remember hearing that it wasn't, it's not the first narration of this story that was ever done, but it's definitely a narration I looked into a few years ago, and that was Dave Useless. So I do remember watching Dave Useless's story. Well, not story, but narration of this, and I mean, it's really well made for what this one is. Although I've read a story like this before, I don't remember what story it was, but it was one story that didn't really have, kept my attention to it. But yeah, this one, in my opinion, is actually a pretty good cell phone creepypasta. The one thing I would have to say is that some of the sentences were kind of confusing. Some of the sentences were kind of confusing in a sense if you understand what I mean. I mean, well, the grammar was honestly was good, as well as the sentence structuring and all that. But I mean, I would have to say there were a few grammatical errors in the story, just a few grammatical errors, and I believe there were a few punctuation errors in the story, but mainly with the story itself is just really confusing. I mean, if you get it in a sense, it's just really confusing sentences. Like, there were sentences in the story that honestly made me feel very confused because I honestly didn't understand, what was going on and all. So, that was kind of one of the reasons why I didn't really know or understand, what was actually happening in a sense. I'm sure most of you guys probably will see that as, something else. Maybe that's probably how the story is, or it's supposed to be out like that, but yeah, I mean, I don't know, to be honest. Maybe you guys might, maybe if you guys did take a look at the story, maybe, yeah, I might, have a better explanation. But yet again, I'm gonna say this right now. This story was not bad. Definitely not perfect, but, I'm definitely saying this right now that this story itself was not a bad story. I'm not gonna lie. It does have, a good potential of the concept of being, good and all. And I'm not denying that one bit. This story was honestly really well done and pretty well made. But the only complaint I would have to say, it's not really a major one per se, but I want to state this is here's the fact that the sentences at times were obviously really confusing. I mean, maybe that might be just me, but you guys might find something else different about your opinion different on this. I mean, there were a few sentences that didn't really make a whole lot of sense. I mean, if you read the story for yourself, you'll see how confusing some of the sentences are. I mean, some of the stuff doesn't really make a whole lot of sense in the story, but other than that, the story was not bad. Not perfect, but definitely not bad either. So, yeah, I'm gonna definitely be, complete your honest. So, yeah, that's something I'm definitely saying right now. But yet again, who really knows, to be honest. So, yeah, I'm gonna sit here and say this right now. Yeah, like I'm gonna say, I can't find out who the original author of this story is. I know I've been trying to see if I could find the author for the story, but for whatever reason, I can't seem to find out who the author of the story is. I have been trying to look for the original author for the story, but unfortunately, it's not the case. So, yeah. Since I don't know who the original author for the story is, I'm gonna leave this as anonymous for now. If I ever find out who the original author of the story is, I'll be sure to give the author, like, him or her proper credit. So, yeah, that's all I could definitely say. But, yeah, other than that, definitely gonna state right now that this is just my opinion. You happen to disagree with me, that's fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions regards to these, creepypastas. Something my own personal thoughts. My final rating of this story would have to be a 9 out of 10. I'm giving it a 9 because it's not a bad story. Yes, I will agree that it's a little, to put it bluntly, confusing at sentences, but not bad at all. So, yeah, it's not a bad story, but it was definitely confusing at times. Anyways, that being said, what did you guys think about this, creepypasta? Did you enjoy it? Did you not? Also, what you have done personally to help make this story a lot better? Feel free to leave me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I'm the Queen of Lions. Thank you so much for watching today's episode. And if you're brand new here to this channel, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe because I make brand new videos every single day. Don't forget to ring the notification bell to when I upload so that way you guys will not miss an upload. And as always, please roll the outro because I'm out.